Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone.
Meeting to order. Bonjour et bienvenue.
Good morning.
Number 16 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on National Defense. La réunion d'aujourd'hui.
Today's meeting is taking place in the hybrid format in accordance with the House Order adopted on the 25th of January 2020, and members could be present in person or via Zoom. Proceedings will be published on the website of the House of Commons. For your information, web broadcasting would always show the person speaking and not all the members of the committee.
We're all experienced at this, so we know how this all works, so I'm going to move this ahead. But just a quick reminder that all comments by members should be addressed through the chair. And when speaking, and especially those who do not have a headset this morning, especially when you are answering questions, if you could answer questions and speak very slowly and clearly, it may give our interpreters what they need in order to be able to interpret what you're saying. Written statements are fine because the interpreters were able to review them in advance. But answering questions, I would ask that if you're not wearing a headset to actually slow down and speak as clearly and as you can. So pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, February 9th, 2021, the committee is resuming its study of addressing sexual misconduct issues in the Canadian Armed Forces, including the allegations against former Chief of the Defence Staff, Jonathan Vance. With us today by video conference for the first hour and 15 minutes as an individual, Madame Marie Deschamps, former Justice, Supreme Court of Canada. She will join us shortly. And also Colonel Retired Michel Drapeau. From the Department of National Defense, Brigadier General Andrew Atherton, Director General of Professional Military Conduct, and Dr. Denise Preston, Executive Director, Sexual Misconduct Response Center. Up to 6 minutes will be given for opening remarks, after which we will proceed with rounds of questions. So I welcome you all. I thank you all for coming to the committee. We understand how valuable your time is, and we appreciate that you are willing to spend some of it with us here today. So I will now invite Dr. Denise Preston to open with an opening statement of up to 6 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to join you today. My name is Dr. Denise Preston, and I'm a forensic and clinical psychologist with over 30 years of experience dealing with harmful and criminal behavior. I've been the executive director of the Sexual Misconduct Response Center, or SMRC, since May 2017. As many of you know from my past appearances, I report directly to the Deputy Minister of National Defense. As such, I am independent of the chain of command and do not speak on behalf of Operation Honor or the Canadian Armed Forces. However, my team and I work closely with the CAF to ensure we meet the needs of CAF members and the organization. SMRC's mandate consists of 3 broad pillars: to provide support services to CAF members who are affected by sexual misconduct, to provide expert advice on all aspects of sexual misconduct in the CAF, including policy, prevention, reporting, and research, and to monitor CAF's progress in addressing sexual misconduct. It's important to note that the counselors who provide support are civilians who do not have the duty to report. As such, calls are confidential, and we do not require identifying information in order to provide assistance. As part of the final settlement agreement related to sexual misconduct, SMRC is leading on the engagement program that will provide opportunities for class members to share their experiences of sexual misconduct with senior defense representatives. The goals of the program are to allow class members to be heard and acknowledged, to begin to restore relationships between class members and the CAF, and to contribute to culture change. SMRC has evolved significantly in the 5 years since its inception. Demand for our services and expertise has increased year after year, and we have helped shape Operation Honor policies and programs. Despite the work that has been done, there is undeniably more to do. Meaningful culture change is a top priority because the sexualized culture observed by Madame Deschamps persists. While reporting of sexual misconduct is an institutional priority, it is also a very personal decision. We cannot expect reporting to increase significantly when many barriers to reporting remain. The duty to report has been repeatedly identified as a significant barrier because affected members lose autonomy over whether, when, and how to report their experiences. And it can silence them from speaking to potential sources. Retaliation and reprisal in response to reporting are frequently identified as barriers, and these are not well documented or addressed. Finally, there's a need to collect analysis and reporting on sexual misconduct to enable better organizational understanding, response, and accountability. SMRC will continue to press on these and other priorities going forward. Thank you again for this opportunity. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Preston. Now I'd like to invite General Atherton, please, your opening statement.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss Operation Honor and our efforts to provide a safe and respectful environment for all. Je suis directeur général.
I am Executive Director of Professional Military Training. My organization plans and coordinates strategic efforts by the Canadian Armed Forces to fight against sexual misconduct. Our group works with internal and external groups like experts, academics, and defense groups to discuss our approach and seek comments and advice.
It's very much a work in progress. The CAF has taken significant steps to address all forms of sexual misconduct in support of this crucial mission. We have implemented important foundational work in the areas of policy, procedures, training and education, and support for those affected. We acknowledge that there is much more work to do, and I want to assure you that we're continually striving to enhance our approach. Any form of sexual misconduct is unacceptable. It harms our people, it erodes team cohesion, and jeopardizes our operational effectiveness. All CAF members have a duty to report all incidents to the chain of command. However, depending on the nature of the incident, there may be reported to the military police, the Canadian Forces National Investigation Service, civilian police, or the Integrated Complaint and Conflict Management Service. We acknowledge that reporting can be the source of significant stress for affected persons. When people come forward, we must ensure that they are heard, supported, and any allegations are referred to the appropriate authorities. For this reason, there are a number of options for individuals to seek care and support without submitting a formal report through to the chain of command, and most notably through the Sexual Misconduct Response Center, which operates independently from the CAF. Our first concern is always with the well-being of our members, and we never want the stress of reporting to prevent someone from getting the care and the support that they need. That said, we know that we need to do everything we can to reduce the barriers to reporting so that anyone who experiences or witnesses sexual misconduct feels safe and supported to come forward. In her 2015 report on sexual misconduct and sexual harassment in the CAF, former Supreme Court Justice, the Honorable Marie Deschamps, made it clear that culture change is key to addressing sexual misconduct within our ranks. And she was absolutely right. Most recently, in the fall of 2020, we released a culture change strategy to guide and coordinate Operation Honor efforts across the CAF. The path to dignity and respect includes a framework for addressing sexual misconduct through culture change, an implementation plan, and a performance measurement framework. This strategy is informed by and very sensitive to the experiences of those who have been affected by sexual misconduct within the CAF. It also draws on research, evidence, and recommendations from subject matter experts and stakeholders. La stratégie est
The strategy establishes a comprehensive long-term approach for preventing and addressing sexual misconduct, targeting culture. It is a significant step in the right direction, but it is by no means the final version. We will continue to engage with experts, stakeholders, and those who have been affected to discuss the strategy, solicit feedback, and refine our approach.
Much more to do, and we will. In pursuit of the total culture change of which the minister has spoken, we know we have much more to do, and we will. We will not stop until all CAF members can deliver operational excellence with the full support of an institution that fosters mutual trust, respect, and dignity. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I look forward to taking your questions. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General Atherton. Now to Colonel Retired Michel Drapeau, s'il vous plaît. Is he speaking? Colonel Drapeau, could you check your microphone and make sure you've not muted?
Yes, I have. Thank you. So let me say again, let me open by thanking members of the committee for giving me the honor to appear before you on a matter which is of interest to me as a former soldier, as well as an author and a lawyer specializing in military law matters. I followed a discussion that has taken place in a public domain about the recent allegations against a former chief of the defense staff, who is also a governing council appointment. Please know that I've also listened in to the testimonies presented to your committee last Friday by the minister and the deputy minister. In my opening remarks, I will make three separate comments. First, I understand that in 2018, the Ombudsman received allegations of misconduct against the then Chief of the Defense Staff. Acting in strict accord with the 2001 ministerial directives governing his role and function, the Ombudsman reported these allegations to the Ministry of National Defense because he lacked the authority to investigate these allegations. From that point onwards, the matter rested with the minister, who, in my opinion, had a duty to investigate. In fact, the National Defense Act already provides for such an opportunity. I'm referring here to Section 45 of the National Defense Act, which reads as follows. The minister may, where it is expedient, that the minister should be informed on any matter connected with discipline or administration of the Canadian Forces, he may convene a board of inquiry for the purpose of investigating and reporting on that matter. Furthermore, Article 21.081 of the Queen's Regulations and Orders also empowers the minister to appoint a military judge as a board of inquiry. Under the circumstances, this is something that could have been done. Permettez-moi.
Allow me to now get to my second point. Over the past 2 decades, the armed forces has received lots of warnings concerning the endemic sexual misconduct amongst its ranks. What still, in a 2016 report, Ms. Marie Deschamps concluded that there was a high proportion of sexual harassment and sexual assault cases that were not reported because the victims were afraid of the consequences that could impact their professional advancement. In her report, Ms. Deschamps insisted that an independent accountability center regarding sexual misconduct should be created outside the armed forces. For that purpose, the center should be placed under the control of the Department of Defense and located at the National Defense Headquarters in Ottawa. In my opinion, that is not the type of independence sought for by victims of sexual misconduct. Let us be clear. The Department of Defense and the Armed Forces are two stakeholders in the crisis. They work together daily. They are interdependent and share the same headquarters at the National Defense. For a victim of harassment or sexual assault, these two organizations are practically the same, and one nor the other could be considered as external or independent.
To the 1997 report on the Commission of Inquiry into the Somalia deployment, in which Justice Gilles Letourneau wrote, and I quote, "Members of the armed forces who feel the need to initiate a complaint often feel they face two unpalatable choices, either to suffer in silence or to buck the system with all the perils such action entails. In my view, Canadian uniforms do require and deserve to have a dedicated and protected channel of communication to the minister's office," unquote. As a central piece of his report, Justice Letourneau went on to recommend the creation of a civilian inspector general directly responsible to Parliament as an essential part of a mechanism to oversee and control the Canadian Armed Forces. The Inspector General will be appointed by the Governor General, or the Governor in Council, I should say, and be made accountable to Parliament with broad authority to inspect, to investigate, and report on all aspects of national defense and the armed forces. Most importantly, Justice Letourneau emphasized that any members of the Canadian Armed Forces and any public servant NDD would be permitted to approach Inspector General directly for whatever reason and without first seeking prior approval of the chain of command. To conclude, things would have had a very definite outcome in 2018 had an inspector of the armed forces been in existence, because this would have provided potential and actual complainant access to a trusted and independent office capable and skilled to investigate any allegations of misconduct. It would have provided the Minister, D&D, PCO, and Parliament the assurances that any such complaint would have been properly investigated. In my considered opinion, the idea of such an appointment is as valid today as it was back in 1997. This completes my opening remarks. Thank you.
Point d'ordre, Madame la Présidente.
Mr. Doucette? I let this go on because our translator, who had an extraordinary text, had the text of a witness, so it was possible for her to interpret Mr. Drapeau's intervention. But I'm told that without the text, the interpretation would not have been possible. So I am warning you that there may be problems. I think this is very important. I hope we'll be able to resolve the issue before we get to questions and answers.
I agree with you, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe. It was the question. We've asked the interpreters, and they said if the witnesses speak slowly and clearly in answering questions, they were willing to give it a try. So we will allow Madame Deschamps to make her statement, and then we will try with questions because the interpreters also said they have Madame Deschamps' statement.
Just on that point of order, Madam Chair, yeah. I would just ask that when Colonel Drapeau was speaking, if he could lean into hit towards his microphone on his computer, I think it would probably be picked up a lot better. I think at times when he moved back, that's when his voice volume dropped.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bazin. Madame Gallant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my understanding that the interpreters were provided with the speaking notes, and it's not uncustomary for members of the committee to have them have access to the introductory remarks in hand. Is there a reason why the committee members were not provided with the opening remarks?
They were not provided in both languages.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, we will carry on, and the plan is to allow Madame Deschamps to speak, and then we will
Point of
go
order,
to...
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Garrison.
Sorry, I have had my hand raised. I believe it's possible for witnesses to phone in to this meeting. And I would suggest the technicians look at having witnesses who do not have a headset leave the Zoom meeting and phone back into the meeting if that is possible. And that would allow questions to go ahead, even though we would lose the visual.
Actually, he doesn't need to leave the Zoom call because he could just phone off his phone, just keep his computer muted, and then Colonel Drapeau would be able to talk through the telephone.
Okay, so let us just give this a try. The interpreters felt that if we were respectful of them and spoke slowly and clearly, that they would be able to do this. We will ask the members, our witnesses who do not have headsets, to keep that in mind, especially when they are answering questions. And also we will reach out as we're going through this to give them the option of a call-in. Okay, good idea. Thank you.
Madam Chair, clearly during the testimony, it was sometimes not even audible in the language that it was being given in. So I really believe that we, in the interest of time, cannot afford to waste time trying something when we have an alternative that will work. So with respect, Madam Chair, I would ask that we proceed to connecting witnesses without a headset by telephone to this meeting.
Once Madame Deschamps has made your statement, and that gives us about 5 minutes, with which the interpreters are comfortable, and during that 5 minutes, we will make those arrangements. All right. So I would like to call upon the Honourable Marie Deschamps, former Justice, Supreme Court of Canada, to make your opening statement. Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope that
volume's not loud. Madame, can I ask you to speak a little bit louder? If you can raise your voice just a couple of decibels, that might make the difference, because it was even difficult to hear you in your native language. So please, my apologies for the interruptions. Go ahead, please.
Very well. Normally, I'm being criticized for speaking too loud. I'll try and see if it works. Can you hear me now? Yes, please. Very well. There's no problem. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My presentation is very brief. I sent in some notes, but because of some news items this morning, I may be changing my order of presentation. My report dates back to 6 years ago. I did my interviews in 2014, more than 6 years ago. After hearing comments, I have the impression that very little has changed. First of all, concerning allegations concerning General Vance, you will not be surprised to hear me say that I had no idea. I was in contact with General Vance on several occasions, and initially I had the impression that he wasn't receiving the right picture of the situation, but there was a change of guard. And subsequently, I had the impression that the information he was receiving was somewhat fair. That was one of the concerns of your committee. The second concern is the general state of what is being done. What is being done generally in the armed forces when it comes to sexual misconduct. Already, I have read the strategy. Entitled The Path to Dignity and Respect. I have provided comments to those who consulted me. My comments were to the effect that I was expecting to find in that document concrete facts concerning the implementation. Unfortunately, I don't find them. I was told that those facts were found in more tactical documents. Today, I thought I should present some very concrete points which should have been done, in my opinion, 5 years ago, but that your committee could easily put forward. And the first point I would like to present, and I'm saying that I've changed the order of my points because it was already one of the points I thought about. But because of the news I read this morning from Global News, when I read that Major Brennan did not know where to turn to. But I think the situation is difficult to understand because since 2015, in the context of the setting up of the center headed by Madam Preston, in the context of that center, as part of the mandate, I said that that center had to be independent and be the main authority for receiving reports. When I read now that Major Brennan did not know where to turn to, I find that unbelievable. The center has not yet received the mandate to be the main authority to receive reports or complaints. I've heard about the changes that were made at DOD, but I have not read that the center constituted a report for receiving complaints, not even the main authority. In my opinion, that is something that should be implemented concretely and immediately. The second point that I wanted to share with you, which is also very concrete and could be done immediately, which could be done as a priority, is data. You've already heard Ms. Preston say that data collection is her priority. Once again, given the mandate of the center that I recommended be set up in 2015, I said that the center should be the main authority for collecting data. In 2014, I realized that there were several data banks, but there was no communication between the various data banks. The data was not collated in a consistent fashion. You could find that there was an accusation made for violence somewhere, but the bank doesn't say that it is a prosecution for sexual assault. This gives you an idea. And I'm not here to teach you the importance of having the right data for assessing problems and finding solutions. It is fundamental if we want to require people to be accountable. Not only is the center not the main authority, but this center doesn't even have direct access to data. So in my opinion, giving the center this responsibility, or at least giving it access to data, seems to me to be a priority. So I can stick to those two points. I'll give you time for questions. But let me congratulate you in advance for the work you're doing. Now I'm curious. I want to know if the interpreters were able to understand me. Thank you very much, Madam.
Floor for questions, and that begins with Mr. Bazan, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank all our witnesses for coming in today to speak about these very serious allegations. I have to tell you that, after seeing the interview with Major Kelly Brennan yesterday, I have to applaud her for her bravery and her candor. But I'm more deeply disturbed now about these allegations than ever before. And thinking back on the minister appearing at committee on Friday, Minister Sajjan just provided a bunch of non-answers, and it upset me all weekend that he wouldn't address even the simplest thing about, including confirming the meeting with former Defense Ombudsman Gary Walbourn, and either the minister was trying to protect himself when really he should be worried about protecting members of the Canadian Armed Forces who, as our witnesses said so eloquently today, that they aren't sure where they even should be reporting to, despite that we have the Sexual Misconduct Response Center been established now for 6 years. So it is very disturbing. So I want to go to Colonel Drapeau, and I appreciate that you have made some comments in the media. I appreciate that you have both that knowledge from serving in the Canadian Armed Forces as well as a lawyer who has specialized in the National Defence Act and military justice. So, Colonel Drapeau, do you feel, based upon what's transpired here over the last month, that Minister Sajjan properly exercised his authority and responsibilities to the Canadian Armed Forces as prescribed under the National Defence Act?
To be clear, absolutely not. As I said in my opening remarks, he had in fact the duty and the facility, if he wanted to have the matter investigated. He could have appointed one of the military judge as a board of inquiry and get to the bottom of it and then act on it. Now, why did he not do this? I mean, General Vance and Minister Sajjan are known identities for going back to at least 2009, when General Vance recommended, in fact, the posting, the appointment of General Vance, of Major Sajjan, as he was at the time, for service in Afghanistan. They go back at least 10 or close to at least 15 years.
Madam Chair, as we expected, unfortunately, there are problems of interpretation.
Et c'est très important pour...
And that it's very important that I hear what's going on.
So my point, could the minister have investigated it? Because the ombudsman could not. Yes, he could have had, by relying upon Section 45 and the QRNO that gave him, in fact, the tools to do this. And then, had he investigated it, he would have been in a better position to report in a factual manner to the Privy Council office, as he was.
Je comprends pas pourquoi.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Drapeau, stand by.
On continue pas dans ce temps-là, on arrête là.
We have to stop.
Madam Chair, would we be able to get Colonel Drapeau on the phone? I thought we were
They're
going
trying
to
do that right now. Thank you.
Because I do have more questions for Colonel Drapeau. What I'd like to do...
stopped your time, Mr. Bazan. So you'll get your remaining 2.5 minutes when we get Mr. Colonel Drapeau on the phone.
Okay, well, we're waiting for that, Madam Chair, based upon what Colonel Drapeau said in his opening comments. I'm going to drop the following motion, and we can deal with this right now, and I'll have my staff send it to the clerk so it can be circulated. It has been translated. Motion reads that in respect of the committee's study regarding the allegations of sexual misconduct against former Chief of Defence Staff General Jonathan Vance, that the committee summon Gary Walbourn, former National Defence and Canadian Armed Forces Ombudsman, to appear for at least 2 hours before the committee at a date and time determined by the chair, but no later than 10 days following the adoption of this motion, that the committee hearing take place in public and be televised. So I'm putting forward that motion now. We could either deal with it, Madam Chair, while we're waiting for Colonel Drapeau to be hooked up by phone, or we could save it for in between at the end of these witnesses before we start our next section of witnesses in half an hour's time.
Or, Mr. Bazan, we could reserve 15 minutes at the end of the meeting, if you would like, in order to discuss the motion. Would
I
that
do want
be
the motion
would that be
dealt with
acceptable?
today. That
Yes.
is acceptable.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Colonel Drapeau.
Just going back to our previous discussion about summoning witnesses and which witnesses, I think that perhaps that 15 minutes should be done in camera.
All right, that's.
I disagree. It's been tabled in public. I think we should deal with this in public. I think that in the interest of transparency, in the interest of making sure that Canadian Armed Forces and those members who are currently serving who have a lot of questions regarding whether or not they are being listened to at this point in time, I think it's important that we have these debates in public.
But Mr. Bazan, we already did invite the former ombudsman to come and testify.
So I realize that, Madam Chair, that the invitation was made and he took a pass on it, but this is a summons and this is by motion rather than invitation from the clerk. So this would make it very formal and require him to appear.
Okay, stand by. All right, so let's discuss that at the end of this meeting. We have some very esteemed witnesses with us right now. I will reserve 15 minutes at the end of the meeting. Go ahead, Madame Gallant.
Yes. And I would like to remind the Parliamentary Secretary and the committee that we did indeed discuss witnesses previously publicly, so we're not going to be satisfied with doing this in camera. Thank you.
We normally discuss those kind of witnesses at the steering committee and things like that. But I'll take it under advisement. I'll talk to the clerk, but we'll discuss it for the last 15 minutes of this meeting. Thank you. All right. So where are we? Do we have Colonel Drapeau on the phone? I know.
Not yet. I'm still waiting for the phone number.
Madam Chair, while we're waiting, just on a point of order, we have 6 witnesses appearing over a 2-hour meeting, which I think a number of us have raised over numerous meetings that it would be more, I guess, would provide greater information and greater participation by members if we had less witnesses. 6 is significant, and usually we have 2. So by cramming in so many witnesses into one meeting is really unfair to us as members of the committee to get all the questions answered that we're so interested in at this point in time.
Understood, but sometimes very esteemed witnesses who have a lot to contribute to the discussion are only available on a certain day. And rather than turn that witness away who could add quite a bit to the discussion, we decided. So the witnesses are kind of designed. The first 2 witnesses are from CAF D&D. The second 2 witnesses are 2 people with esteemed legal background. And the last 2 witnesses are academic in nature. So they were paired that way to make it as efficient as possible. But I don't disagree with the theme behind your comment, but we had an opportunity for people that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to hear from. So I take that on advice. So. Okay, I'm going to suspend the meeting now just for a few minutes till they get this worked out. It's actually proving to be a little bit more. The phone lines that we have available to us are for listening in. They're not as designed actually for a two-way conversation. They're trying to fix that right now. So I'm going to suspend for a couple of minutes. We'll restart and give us 2-3 minutes. to Mr. Bazan to finish his 6 minutes of questions.
And just before I start, Madam Chair, how many seconds do I have left?
I think it's about a minute and a half. Let me check.
Or two and a half, I thought you said.
2.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And so I'll just put my final question to Colonel Drapeau. And I appreciate what you're saying about Minister Sagen not fulfilling his duty. Now, did former Defense Ombudsman Gary Walborn fulfill his duty in bringing forward the allegations back in March of 2018? And what other course did he have? I know you've made comments about Privy Council Office not having enough information and some blame being laid that former Ombudsman Walborn never provided that information to the Privy Council Office. So did he fulfill all his duties, including the confidentiality of the allegations?
The answer to this is yes. Mr. Walborn had no choice but to report to nobody else but the minister the allegations made to him by the two complainants. He had also no authority to investigate the matter. So the whole thing was passed on to the minister. The minister had fundamentally two duties. One was to investigate. He had the tools to do so by Section 45 of the National Defense Act. And the second duty was to report to PCO because, in fact, allegations were made against somebody who is a governor in council appointment. As far as I understand, the ministry elected not to investigate, not to appoint anybody to do so, but he could have had.
So just and final comment, we are all aware of the allegations that were made against and proved to be untrue against former Vice Chief of Defense Staff Admiral Mark Norman. Could the minister have acted in the same manner where they could have suspended the Chief of Defense Staff the same way they suspended Vice Admiral Mark Norman until the investigation was complete?
I cannot respond to that in the abstract because I would not have known until yesterday what the substance of the allegations were. I can only assume that the ombudsman would have been pretty clear in reporting in confidence to the minister the extent and maybe the seriousness of the allegation, and depending on those factors, that the minister may have been well advised at the time, by prudence, if nothing else, to suspend temporarily the Chief of Defense Staff to have the matter investigated. That would have seemed the reasonable, prudent course of action that was done certainly for Admiral Norman or anybody else facing these kind of allegations.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan. On to Mr. Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and merci à tous et à tous.
Let me thank you all for being here.
With the committee here today and for offering your expertise and experience. I just wanted to start by coming back to something that was discussed or mentioned by Colonel Drapeau in his opening statement, which was he made the point that allegations of harassment were made in 2018, but I also believe that I heard Mr. Drapeau just say he admitted he doesn't know the content of the conversation between the ombudsman and the minister. I just wanted to clarify for the record, this committee has not heard that there were or were not allegations in 2018. I think all we know is that the Privy Council Office determined that there was not any actionable information. So I just want to make sure we clarify that record. My question is to Justice Deschamps and to Dr. Preston, and it's the same question for both. So I'll direct it to you, Justice Deschamps, and then maybe Dr. Preston, if you would also try to answer, I'd appreciate it. The question is, what is the process and what should be done when someone wants to bring forward concerns of sexual harassment, but doesn't want to file an official complaint?
I can attempt to answer that question because what I suggested as process is not necessarily what occurs in practice, because in practice, it was in 2014.
Point d'ordre. Je suis vraiment désolé, Madame.
Point of order, I'm very sorry. I think the sound was better previously. Unfortunately, now our interpreters can't interpret very well. Maybe because I wasn't speaking loud enough. I shall repeat.
Say is that in 2014, when I did my interviews, it was all over the place, and it was not necessarily what should have occurred. And what I suggested is that whenever there is a complaint, they should first of all turn to the center, and if they are not ready to lay a formal complaint, at least they can get support from the center, and then the center can bring them into laying or bringing a.
Je suis vraiment désolé.
I'm sorry, extremely sorry.
Madame Deschamps, can you hold your microphone? That's correct. Hold it out there.
Yes.
Okay, try it again, please.
Est-ce que ça va mieux?
Is that better? I believe so.
Je vais recommencer.
I'll start all over again and in the second official language.
Ou la première selon.
Or the first. In 2014, there was no clear voice, no outcome for those who were not ready, particularly women who were not ready to file complaints. What I recommended was that the people who were victims either of harassment or assault have a place where they could go, someone they could turn to obtain support. The first priority is to support the victim. In my mind, there had to be a very clearly identified spot, and it was the center. From that point, what I also recommended, it wasn't, and it's in the concrete points, there was someone that had to be like an advocate. This person could take up the case, talk with the person to the point where the person felt at ease to be able to lay a complaint. Now, to do that, the advocate could support the person to decide where they wanted to lay the complaint. So in brief, that was the recommendation I made in 2015. Thank you very much. And I'll be putting the same question to Dr. Preston.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. In practice, the way it happens is very similar to what Madame Deschamps has explained, that the center exists. It's a confidential place for people to come and lay allegations, make complaints, discuss their experiences, and our counselors will provide whatever services, whatever support they need. We don't require reporting. We don't force reporting. We very much take our cue based on what CAF members want to do. So we will support them and provide them with options and choices. We also have a service which is called a Response and Support Coordination Program, where we will assign a dedicated counselor to the CAF members if they so desire, and that counselor will fulfill all the roles that Madame Deschamps talked about: advocacy, accompaniment, support, helping negotiate the whole journey that they're going on, and really be a partner to them throughout the entire journey if and when they decide to report.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Merci.
On to Monsieur Brunet-Duceppe, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, all witnesses. I'm sorry for all the problems. House employees are making sure that we are able to meet today. I want to congratulate them. Thank you, and I thank you for being here today. I have a first question for Mr. Drapeau. A while ago, you said Section 45 of the National Defense Act stipulates that a minister could intervene. In your opinion, why did he not intervene at that time, whereas he had the authority to do so? Answer: for different reasons. He had the capacity. The interpreter says that it's difficult to interpret Mr. Drapeau.
Colonel Drapeau, you need to slow down a little bit and speak with your parade voice, or we're not going to be able to use our great interpreters.
Maybe because the minister had known Mr. General Vance for at least 10 years. They knew each other sometime around 2009 when General Vance asked that Major Sashan be present in Afghanistan. So they worked together, they served together. They are comrades at arms. They worked at an operational theater for some 10 years. So maybe they had an open conversation and responded to the questions by the minister. Maybe he was satisfied with the answers he received. That's the only reason why I want to believe that no formal action was taken at that time. Thank you, Mr. Drapeau. Justice Deschamps, I was very interested in your testimony, just like in the other testimonies. You said that at some point, in your opinion, General Vance did not necessarily have the right information. Could you explain how he was being provided with the wrong information or the wrong picture of the situation? In my report, I explained that as people climb up the hierarchical ladder, they tend to turn to other things. And he was surrounded by people who were highly placed and who had the pink picture of the situation, a rosy picture of the situation. So he was told that all recommendations were implemented. But when I met him for the first time, I was very surprised, and I told him, in practice, that's not what I'm hearing. Eventually, there was a change in the guard, and at that point, I believe he received more specific information. What was his reaction at the time when you told him that his understanding was kind of rosy? Well, he listened. At least it's good to know. Thank you very much. He would listen. He listened. It's never fast in the army. Things move slowly, and finally there was a change of guard. Thank you, Justice Deschamps. Ms. Preston, we heard the comments of Justice Deschamps about the center. I would like to hear you say something about the lack of power of the center, rather, as Justice Deschamps said. And we even heard the interview in the global news. The alleged victim did not know who to talk to. Don't we have a problem here? I would like to know what you think about this.
I'll address your first question, which is about the sort of the lack of power of the center. It is true that the center that I run does not have accountability over CAF. We have no authority over CAF. At best, what is in our mandate is that we are to monitor CAF's efforts to implement Operation Honor. And in order for us to be able to monitor their efforts, we need to be able to have access to certain information and certain sets of data and that is not something right now that is well established. It's certainly a priority that we're continuing to work on. With respect to the second part of your question about people not knowing about the center, that is absolutely a critical priority for us. That is to continue to raise awareness so that people are aware of the center. Internal surveys do indicate that a large number of members are aware of the center. They may or may not have actually used our services, but they are aware of it. However, we continue to conduct outreach on an ongoing basis. We travel across the country and visit bases and wings and do quite extensive outreach. But clearly it's an indication we need to do more. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Do I still have time, Madam Chair?
15 seconds.
15 secondes. Oui.
15 seconds. Oh, Lord. Thank you. Maybe later.
J'apprécie. Okay, Mr. Garrison, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and let me apologize if there are bandwidth problems. We've now lost internet service at my house, and so I'm tethered through my cell phone. And I have been in and out of the meeting, therefore, and may have missed part of this discussion. So I want to start by thanking Major Brenny for her courage in coming forward over the weekend. I think that the allegations that she brought forward are extremely troubling, and I'm going to ask questions about whether Operation Honor and the Canadian Forces can simply proceed as if nothing has happened here. And I will not ask those questions to Dr. Preston or to the Brigadier General, because I believe as they are within the Department of Defense or Canadian Armed Forces, I would be putting them in a compromised position. So my first question is to Colonel Drapeau. And it's a technical and legal question, but whether or not we, as one of my colleagues suggested, know whether allegations were made to the minister, we do know allegations were made in 2018. That was confirmed by the Privy Council office, whether or not they found them actionable. So in that circumstance, Colonel Drapeau, could the minister have removed the Chief of Defense Staff either from his position temporarily or at least from his position of being in charge of Operation Honor?
Mr. Garrison, as far as I'm concerned, the answer to both your questions is yes.
Thank you very much. My next set of questions I will direct to Madam Justice Deschamps. And first of all, let me thank you again for the work that you've done. And let me thank you today for bringing some specific proposals forward. Given the level of allegations that have been made, both by Major Brenny and by others, about the failures of Operation Honor, do you believe that Operation Honor in its current form can be effective in addressing sexual misconduct within the military?
General Vance was, presented himself as a champion of Operation Honor. As such, it affects the credibility of the operation. However, Operation Honor has been followed by another strategy, which coincided with his departure from the forces. So I do believe that what we are hearing and the investigation that's going on will not impair the efforts that are made, because even though I'm not happy with the pace, and even though I'm not happy with the fact that there is not enough concrete steps that are taken immediately, there is something that needs to go forward, and a tremendous amount of effort has been put into this path to dignity and respect, and a lot of people have been enrolled, and I think the Canadian Armed Forces should double their efforts in order to build up or rebuild its credibility. So I don't think they should drop the ball now. That would be the worst thing that could happen.
Given that we know that the channels for investigating complaints against an individual member of the forces are clear, and that there is an investigation into the allegations against General Vance, I want to set that aside and ask you whether you believe there should be an investigation into the broader circumstances here, and someone given the authority, either through a board of inquiry or through the appointment of an expert such as yourself, to suggest the changes that are really necessary here to restore confidence of serving members that sexual misconduct will be treated seriously at the highest level.
Certainly having someone who is completely outside the forces helps inspiring trust. And given the fact that the allegation concerned the Chief of Defense Staff, certainly it would be a positive step if someone from the outside could conduct the inquiry. This said, I'm not looking for a new job. I've done my share and I've continued to contribute as much as possible, but I think there are many people who have a lot of credibility that can do that.
Thank you very much, Justice Deschamps. I certainly do sincerely thank you for all the efforts you've made and today. I just want to ask one last thing. The allegations over the weekend are not just against General Vance. They're against the senior leadership of the Canadian Forces. And Major Brenny has said that sexual misconduct, first of all, was widely known among the senior leadership, not just in the case of General Vance. And secondly, she's made a very serious allegation that no follow-up was made when there was an allegation of sexual assault. Do we not really need that independent inquiry at this point?
Well, I already mentioned that because of the level of the...
Malheureusement, on a encore un problème.
Unfortunately, we have interpretation problems once again. I'm sorry. I have to remember that even if the question is in English, I could answer in French. I said that considering that the allegations concern the Chief of Staff and, as you say, people amongst the highest levels of leadership, in my opinion, a totally independent investigation would be necessary. I believe I said so before. Let me repeat. Thank you very much, Madam.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the witnesses for being here. This is such an incredibly important discussion. And again, I want to reiterate what my colleagues have said about Major Brennan and her incredible testimony over the weekend, but also how incredibly and fundamentally jarring the specter and breadth and depth of that commentary was. And that's why the work we are doing here is so incredibly important. And I will want to revisit, Madam Chair, why the possibility of having two of the witnesses that we have here today come back again on another occasion so that we might be able to go into more depth on their testimony. My question is for Mr. Drapeau.
Point of order. Sorry to interrupt my colleague Leona, but I'm having trouble hearing her. I don't know if it's just me, but it's cutting in and out. I don't know because the floor audio was still turned on or not, but it was very, very tough to hear. Might have to put your mic a little bit closer to your mouth.
Okay. There you go. All right. Sorry about that. Mr. Drapeau, when the minister testified before a committee, he said that he had always passed everything to the proper authority. I just want to clarify from your testimony in the case of possible allegations, whatever they may be, the minister was in fact himself the proper authority and had not only the duty, but the facility to act. The buck stops with him. Is that your testimony?
My testimony is, having received a caution from the ombudsman, and the ombudsman had no one else to turn to except the minister. Now the minister saddled with these allegations, he had a duty to first investigate and second report. And he had the tools and the authority to investigate under Section 45 of the National Defense Act. He also had a duty to report, presumably after having investigated the matter summarily or fully, to PCO, given the CDS is a governor-in-council appointment. Along the way, he might have elected to suspend, not to remove, to suspend the CDS whilst this matter was being investigated. I think any removal, of course, of a governor-in-council is outside the authority of the minister. That would probably involve cabinet or the prime minister or both.
Thank you. In a democracy, the trust and confidence in a standing military is fundamentally dependent on elected civilian oversight, i.e., a minister of national defense. Yet we understand the possibility, as a result of this minister's friendship and working relationship and long history, and possibly other compromising information between Minister Sajjan and former Chief of Defense Staff Jonathan Vance, there may in fact be a conflict of interest with the minister, hindering his ability to carry out his duties as a minister. Could you provide some comment? What do we, as members of Parliament or Canadian citizens, how do we ensure that a minister of national defense is not compromised, not able to be leveraged or influenced, and is able to carry out his critical oversight as an elected official of a standing military that has the right to bear arms?
Mrs. Ellis, permit me to say two comments in response to your questions. First and foremost, there are two key players that should also have been involved in the decision-making by the minister. First and foremost, the deputy minister. Just by the very nature of her title and rank, she's there to advise the minister on all range of issues that the minister could rely upon to receive advice. First. Second, the minister immediate subordinate is the Judge Advocate General, who is schooled and expert in military law. The combination of both the Deputy Minister and the Judge Advocate General should have provided the minister with all of the advice that he requires to respond to this.
But
now,
Mr. Drapeau, who investigates the minister?
Time is up. Thank you very much. On to Madame Vandenbeld, please.
I would just like to caution that I think this committee needs to be very careful when we start using innuendo and words like compromised or leveraged and innuendo about relationships when we're referring to a minister. I really think that there's a lot being said here that we really need to take a step back and be careful about things that are being alleged that have absolutely no bearing in fact. Having said that, I also think that there's been a lot of speculation in the media, and there have been a lot of things said here that do not bear out when we look at the actual testimony. And there has been nothing here that says that, A, there were any allegations in 2018. There's nothing here that says that if there was anything raised, that it was even the same as what was raised 2 weeks ago. And all we know is that whatever was raised was referred, we have heard PCO say that there was nothing actionable. And I think we need to be very careful. There's a real concern here, which is, why is it that if there were women who have experienced this, who came forward, if these women did not want to make official complaints? I would like to ask Madame Deschamps to talk about the fact, and also Dr. Preston, that if somebody comes forward and says that something has happened, but does not absolutely want that to go through a formal process, does not want that to be repeated, wants it held confidential, what is it that we can do in those circumstances? What is the proper process in those kinds of circumstances, and how can we improve that? And Madame Deschamps, if you could please start by perhaps talking about some of the things that have been said in the testimony today about the minister's responsibility and whether or not you agree with that. Thank you.
First of all, I'm not sufficiently familiar with the statute to comment on what Colonel Drapeau has suggested. However, as to your point on what someone who has suffered sexual abuse or sexual harassment or sexual misconduct can do, I think the first thing that should be done is to go to the root of why that person does not want to speak out, because not reporting will only compound the problem. So this is where the expert advice, the expert support of the center is very important, because if we keep or if we have too many unreported incidents, what we call in the jargon restricted reports, which are reports that are kept confidential, signalements, disclosures that are kept confidential, we will not be achieving significant progress. So one of the key roles of the center is to support the person and walk her or him through the process to ensure that the person, first of all, will not suffer retaliation, but become strong enough to speak up.
Dr. Preston?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I'll end up reiterating some of what Madame Deschamps said, but it is true that the safest place for a Canadian Armed Forces member to talk about what has happened to them is to come to the Sexual Misconduct Response Center. And I say that for two reasons. One is because we are independent of the chain of command, and so they are able to speak to us confidentially, and the information will not get back to the chain of command. And that links to the second point, which is all of the counselors at my center are civilians who do not have a duty to report. And so regardless of what we are told and who they are alleging has committed this behavior, that information is held confidential, and we will provide whatever support, assistance, advocacy, or accompaniment that members need when they so choose to do it. It needs to be their choice, their timing, and we will provide that for them. Thank you.
Dr. Preston, what could we do to strengthen the SMRCs? What could we do to give you even more tools at your disposal to be able to act on this?
I think there's a number of things that need to be prioritized, and that certainly have been on our work plan for a period of time. So we want to look at reporting in terms of implementing alternatives to reporting that are outside of the chain of command. Another source of support that has been raised on a number of occasions is the provision of independent legal advice for victims. This is provided in other militaries, and it is provided in a number of provinces in Canada. So there are certainly a number of priorities related to better supporting Canadian Armed Forces members. There are other things that could be done as well to facilitate our ability to be able to better monitor the work that CAF is doing. So one of the ones we talked about already is access to data, better centralization of the data. I think the organization is seriously challenged by a lack of full understanding of the depth and breadth of this problem. There needs to be more work on data and some research. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to suspend for a minute so we can do the sound check for our next two witnesses. But I think it's worthwhile to hear from our next two witnesses. We'll begin with Dr. Eichler, please, for your opening statement.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to speak today. My name is Dr. Maya Eichler. I'm an associate professor and Canada Research Chair at Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax. My research focuses on gender integration and sexual violence in the Canadian Armed Forces. I will take this opportunity to reflect on the limitations of Operation Honor. And I will argue that it is time to refocus our attention on military culture change and accountability through external oversight. I'm going to highlight two limitations of Operation Honor. Operation Honor aimed to eliminate sexual misconduct, but it never asked why sexual misconduct happens or how institutions change. Let me explain. Operation Honor never addressed the root causes of sexual misconduct. Most significantly, Operation Honor did not make the link between sexual misconduct and military culture, specifically the role of gender and masculinity in it. The Canadian Armed Forces is a unique workplace that is designed around an unstated but institutionally assumed white heterosexual male norm. The culture of the military is the outcome of a long history of legally sanctioned sex and gender discrimination against those who don't fit that male norm. Legal discriminations have been removed against women and LGBTQ2 members, but those labeled as other for not fitting the preconceived norm of the Canadian soldier are often still treated like less than ideal soldiers. This entrenched white heterosexual male norm of the Canadian soldier is at the very core of military culture. And it is the perpetuation of that norm that enables gender-based violence, including sexual harassment and sexual assault, and other isms such as racism. When we talk about root causes, we need to also keep in mind the unique nature of the military as a federally regulated workplace. The military makes exceptional demands on its workers, but it has weak workers' rights. The military gives #1 priority to operational readiness, demanding from its workers unlimited liability, universality of service, total dedication to work, uniformity, hierarchy, obedience, as well as loyalty to the group and mission before self. And yet, there is no union or independent oversight body to truly defend military support their related concerns. It is these exceptional demands of military work that have often been used in the past to justify the military as not the essentially male workplace. As such, it is simply astounding to me that Operation Honor documents routinely lack any reference to gender, masculinity, or men, or the unique dynamics of the military workplace. It will require a foundational shift in the military's culture, gender, and workplace in order to address sexual misconduct in a meaningful way. And this brings me to the second limitation of Operation Honor, which is its incorrect and simplistic assumptions about how institutions change. Operation Honor assumed that change can come about by ordering everyone to stop engaging in sexual misconduct. That is, by changing individual behaviors. No one took steps to ensure that CAF members had the resources and supports they needed to implement Operation Honor. This situation was compounded by a generalized lack of institutional expertise on sexual misconduct, culture change, or gender issues. CAF declared Operation Honor its top institutional priority, but its words did not match what people on the ground were seeing. This disconnect produced fatigue and resistance. Perhaps even more importantly, the problem with Operation Honor is that it was about the military reforming itself. There is no evidence that such an approach can work and bring the necessary changes. This is especially the case considering that the military showed reluctance, if not some resistance, towards following the recommendations of the Deschamps report, rather than setting up the recommended independent external accountability center. CAF chose to self-monitor. Time has proven that this type of approach, which did not address root causes, that was reactive and inconsistent and based on self-monitoring, was too linear and too simplistic to succeed and solve the complex problem it sought to address. We have an opportunity right now to capture these lessons learned from Operation Honor and to move forward towards culture change and accountability through external oversight. I conclude with 2 key points. CAF needs culture change. CAF needs a comprehensive strategy that acknowledges its institutional role and responsibility in preventing sexual misconduct, along with all other forms of discrimination and violence in the military workplace. Second, CAF needs oversight. Given the ongoing resistance to military culture change, long-term, independent external oversight is required. This is the only way to ensure true accountability and the only way to ensure the health and well-being of all women and men in the Canadian military. I was pleased to hear the Minister on Friday acknowledge that toxic elements of masculinity exist within the Canadian Armed Forces and that he recognizes the need for a complete and total culture change. To me, the important question today is, what are the next steps that your committee can take to move this process along in a way that provides clear direction to the Minister, the Department, and the Canadian Armed Forces, including on creating some form of oversight? Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eichler. Dr. Okros, please.
Madam Chair, I'm speaking to you from Toronto, the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. Mes commentaires seront
My comments will be in English.
on issues of harassment in the CAF for over 40 years, and I see strengths and weaknesses in the current version of the movie. Leaders at all levels are seeking to address issues and do the right thing. The supporting functions provided by the SMRC are helpful, and the recent path has some promising ideas. But Operation Honor has not had the results intended. Why? The reason has been an incomplete understanding of the issues, which has led to incomplete solutions, and as heard, underpinned by unwillingness to critically assess certain aspects of CAF identity and culture. 6 years ago, General Lawson said CAF culture and behaviors had improved from the 90s. While he was correct, the CAF had not been attending to evolutions across society. Expectations around the standard of workplace conduct have continued to rise. People are no longer prepared to ignore, endure, or accept behaviors that may not have been called out in the past. So while there has been some progress in the last 5 years, the gap has likely grown yet again. I'll then note that 2 years ago, senior leaders said they didn't know what the root causes are. External experts said they did, but weren't being listened to. The problem is the issue has been framed as about sexual misconduct. The description of the term puts the emphasis on the first word, describing it as sexual advances, sexual overtones, flirting. There are CAF members who annoy people with overtures, but the key issue is not about sex. If I hit you with a shovel, you wouldn't call it inappropriate gardening. It's about power. It's using sexually and racially coded language to create and police social hierarchies about who is important and who is not. And the death of 1,000 cuts of an individual's self-worth, identity, and sense of belonging. That's what's getting broken, not people feeling uncomfortable seeing an explicit picture or hearing an off-color joke. The path starts to expand the framing of the problem. It's taken 40 years, but it's a good first step. It acknowledges that there are cultural factors that can increase incidents of sexual misconduct, but the door is only opened very slightly. There are a couple of carefully worded statements that gender stereotypes, outdated conceptions of the warrior, and a male-dominated workforce can create harmful culture dynamics, but nothing more, and nothing of substance in the rest of the document to address even those. The key omission is the continued reluctance to name power and militarized masculinities. This requires a careful and critical analysis of how the military constructs the soldier, sailor, and aviator, and equally the leader and commander. We need to examine the institutionalized and systemic processes that shape military identity and ask, how much of one's identity do they have to give up in order to be successful in the CAF? Most of those leading have not had to think about this. Left-handed people know they live in a right-handed world, but right-handed people don't. It isn't apparent to us when the world is constructed to fit us. The CAF was a good fit for most seniors, and we still have some who don't realize or can't see why it isn't a good fit for others. They continue to use terms and narratives that they believe resonate with all, but actually serve to accentuate the dominant identity, hence increasing the social hierarchies and leaving some feeling isolated, ignored, or not valued for who they are. The path indicates that work will be done to update professional development and enhance leadership capacities. Both are needed, but should be informed by analyses of CAF identity and the practices of militarized masculinities, which the minister alluded to. As part of this, I would identify a 2016 U.S. Equal Opportunities Commission report that identified 12 factors that increase the risk of workplace harassment. The CAF has 10 of these and is at the high end on 6: significant power disparities, encouraging alcohol consumption, a young workforce, use of coarse language, single gender dominated culture, and a homogeneous workforce. Only 2 are reflected in the path. Proper considerations of institutional and systemic factors to create the conditions where sexualized language is used to diminish others requires the CAF to shift away from the current focus on the weak individual. Harassment incidents and lack of reporting are not because people haven't read the definition or don't know how to file a report. There are strong social factors that are intentionally created by the CAF that set these conditions. Major Brennan addressed some of these. Addressing these factors means challenging some central tenets of the profession, facets that are key to success, but also create unhealthy conditions. Obedience to authority, normative conformity, and group loyalty are essential, that they also create intense social pressure to fit in, to conform, and above all, to stay silent. Power and hierarchies are critical to effective command, but signal that it's acceptable for individuals to use social power against others. Members need to know that their buddy will have their back when the brown stuff hits the rotating object. But this means people are constantly judging others to see if they measure up. And outdated stereotypes continue to put women under the microscope to constantly be tested and forced to prove they can do the job. My comments lead to a key issue. The first objective of Operation Honor is leadership-driven culture change. There is still no clarity on which aspects of CAF culture are to be changed and which are allowed to remain the same. The central question for this committee is if that is the decision CAF leaders make on their own. I look forward to your questions.
All right, thank you very much. Unfortunately, if we are going to reserve 15 minutes for the motion brought up earlier, we'll have to suspend here and allow our witnesses to sign off because it's now 1:45. So I just wanted to say to the witnesses, thank you. I apologize for the technological challenge we've had today. I think you brought quite a lot to this discussion, which was very important about how do these things happen and how do we make it so they don't happen. So I would like to thank the witnesses for joining us today. I would really, on behalf of all of the members of the committee, we appreciate you joining us and your time. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, mesdames, messieurs.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
We're going to suspend for a couple of minutes, and then they'll reconvene and bring the a motion to the floor. you everyone for your patience. You will, all the committee members will have received an email. Please raise your hand if you have not, which included the information that I think is important when it comes to this discussion. So we're not, the clerk is not allowed to disclose this information in public. And that's why we took the step of sending you an email. So now you do understand. So we can, and I also need to remind everyone, so when a witness declines an invitation, we can go back to that witness and escalate it and say, you know, it's very important that this happens. But I don't believe we can actually, we as a committee cannot compel that witness to appear, just so you understand that. But if you wish, what the clerk can do is can write a letter to the witness and explain the reasons why it's so important for him or her to come and appear. So and we cannot discuss what was sent to you in an email that is considered to be confidential. So does okay, Madame Gallant has her hand up. Does anyone else want to speak to this? Okay, Madame Gallant and then Mr. Bazan. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, testifying before this committee, one is granted complete immunity from any potential charges of civilian charges or being sued or criminal charges or any other charges. The person has complete immunity if they testify here?
I don't believe that's the case. We have parliamentary privilege here, but I'm not sure that that would cover witnesses, but go ahead. Yep.
Can't hear anything.
And that testimony cannot be used against them?
I think that they have privilege on what they say. They can't be sued for what they say in committee. I'm quite certain that anything said in this committee could be used in a court of law.
Actually, you're wrong on that.
Okay, so
Madam Chair,
I think
some of the conversation that's happening at the table is not getting fed back into the meeting for those of us that are virtual.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Bazan.
Okay, so I actually wrote to the law clerk asking for advice, and as we all know, that witnesses enjoy the same privileges as MPs do at committee and in the House. They cite a number of examples. I'd circulate this, but it's only in English. Unfortunately, what you just circulated from the clerk was only in English, so I just caution that we shouldn't be doing that. And so despite the fact that he received legal counsel, he may not have received the best legal counsel on whether or not to appear. And the law clerk pointed out to me that witnesses appear before committees are also protected from arrest and molestation, as do members of parliament, and that the legal proceedings up until this point in time have not been able to be inserted into a court of law, and in particular made mention of the former sponsorship scandal and testimony provided by former Minister Adolf Gagliano, and that was, or Alfonso Gagliano, and that in that situation, the Quebec Superior Court actually struck any use of using testimony from committee in legal proceedings. So Mr. Walborn, if he does appear, because we pass a formal motion to summon him, then he would be afforded the same protections that each and every one of us are afforded. Now, I would also just add, Madam Chair, that we're talking about whether or not we can force a witness to appear. I believe the rules on that is that the committee would, if we want to go the next step after issuing a summons based upon a motion from the committee that was then transcribed into a letter from the clerk to Mr. Walborn, and if he still declines it, if we decide to want to go one step further, is that we could then pass a motion to take to the House and to the Speaker to ultimately to subpoena him to appear. Now, I'll just make the argument that based upon, all the evidence or all the reporting that has gone on, there seems to be a meeting that has taken place in March of 2018 that first raised the specter of sexual misconduct on behalf of the former Chief of Defense Staff. Minister Sajjan has obfuscated when he was at committee on Friday over whether or not that meeting took place. I think we need to have Mr. Walborn appear at this committee. I encourage colleagues to support this motion so that we can get down to the bottom of this and ultimately, without tainting the investigation that is taking place on general events right now, that we can actually start setting the processes in motion to change the way sexual misconduct is reported, how organizations within the Canadian Armed Forces and National Defense operate, and ultimately that we can make the place more protected and safer for all members of the Canadian Armed Forces so that they can operate in a respectful and welcoming manner. Mr. Garrison has his hand up, Madam Chair.
Okay, stand by. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Garrison.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I agree completely and actually wholeheartedly with Mr. Bazan that it is necessary for us to take this step. This could have been precluded by the minister being more forthcoming. If the minister at any point would like to write to us again and confirm when he knew or did not know about
Point of order, Madam
allegations.
Chair. We have a visitor on the screen that should not be participating in an in-camera meeting.
We're not in camera, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To go back to what I was saying is that we wouldn't be in this unfortunate situation if the minister would have been more forthcoming. No one is asking him to talk about the specifics of allegations, but we are asking whether he had knowledge of allegations. It's not about whether he took action to investigate those, although we heard testimony today that he clearly could have. It's the fact that he took no action to protect serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces against very serious allegations, which have gotten a lot more serious over the weekend. If the military ombudsman does appear, there may in fact be things that he believes he cannot say. He is free to do that before the committee. This also illustrates a second problem that we've dealt with for a long time, and that is that the military ombudsman is not an officer of parliament, but in fact reports to the Minister of Defense, and that creates the situation that we're in today. And I've long called for the military ombudsman to be an officer of parliament. We wouldn't be in this situation if he had that independence. So I think it is necessary for us to proceed, but again, I would stress it could be precluded by action from the minister to provide the information which he failed to provide in our last meeting.
Okay, so let's go ahead, Madame Vanderbilt.
So just for clarification on what Mr. Bazan was proposing, so would this mean, Madam Chair, that you would then write, or the clerk would then write back to Mr. Walborn and strongly encourage and explain why it would be important, and then if there's escalation, we would come back to the committee to do that? Like we at this point, it would just be a letter to Mr. Walborn, correct? Is that what we're debating? Because if that's the case, then yeah.
I think what we're doing is, Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Bazan.
That we are issuing, passing a motion that summons him, that Mr. Walborn can then do with it as he wishes, but the motion will pass. That motion, along with the letter, will be forwarded to him by the clerk, advising him that we have requested him to appear, and with the wording of the motion as it's been tabled. So I think that it's very straightforward. It provides direction to Mr. Walborn that we do need to hear from him, that there is a number of questions surrounding what he knows and the sequence of events as they've unfolded through his time as the National Defense Ombudsman for the Canadian Armed Forces. So I think that we need to get this on the record, and he has full immunity as described by the Rules and Operations and the Parliament of Canada Act. So he's eligible to come forward and testify without fear of repercussions by other legal means.
All right. So you're tabling your motion, Mr. Bazan?
It's been tabled. I tabled it earlier when I dropped it during testimony earlier today, and I do request that this come to a vote.
Recorded division? Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Bagnall.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we're setting a precedence with this motion, if the members of the armed forces won't feel they can go in confidence to the ombudsman on future issues, on any issues. This seems to be the one place they can go that's independent, whose conversations is private. Will they feel that they cannot, now that a parliamentary committee can just summons the ombudsman at any time, and then their information is not confidential anymore? Just like to ask that question.
May I answer that, unless one of the other members want to dive in here, Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Bazan.
Right now, the Canadian Armed Forces Ombudsman is responsible to coming to appear before committee and report from time to time. We never ask them to disclose confidential issues that they deal with on behalf of members of the Canadian Armed Forces. And as you know, both Colonel Drapeau said in his testimony earlier today, and as Mr. Garrison just mentioned, the ombudsman isn't independent because he has to answer to the minister. So, you know, he does have a chain of command that currently is obstructing his ability or her ability to do their job. So, Madam Chair, I just say back to Mr. Bagnall that this is not about getting into the details of the allegations, because we don't want to taint the investigation. I think justice needs to be served here for all parties in question, but let's actually have a serious discussion with Mr. Walborn over the sequence of events and what he had as discussions with the minister relating to the allegations, but not the details of those allegations.
All right, then. I think any other further points that people would like to bring up at this time? Yeah, So let's see if we can get this through unanimous consent. All right?
Yes, Madam Chair, I think. Yeah.
Is there unanimous consent?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. I'm sorry, because we're doing this virtually. Does anyone not give it their consent to this motion? No? Okay. Well, this looks like it has been passed with unanimous consent. All right. Thank you very much. You made that easy. All right. So we're a little bit late. So I'm going to call meeting adjourned.
Point of order.
Oh. I think we're good.